Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of my Linguistics podcast. This will be another monologue. I'm getting excited for some actual interviews with others, but for now, while I have the creative momentum going, I wanted to make another monologue about something that was suggested. So, a big topic, and especially something that I'm familiar with and know a decent amount about. I actually mentioned it in my historical linguistics monologue. Is Indo-European linguistics and Proto-Indo-European. So today I really wanted to talk about what the heck does Indo-European mean, and what is Proto-Indo-European, and how do we know about it? What can we learn about it? What's the news about it? So I'm going to try to cover all that today because it's definitely something I've kept up to date with, something I find really interesting, and something that there's a lot of resources available about, but that often these resources assume a certain level of expertise in linguistics, assume maybe a degree or something. So I wanted to give my attempt at making a kind of more introductory video / podcast episode to this topic. So first of all, what the heck is Proto-Indo-European? So this is, when you see a language that has proto on it, this means that the language was never spoken and it's a hypothetical language. What does hypothetical mean here? It doesn't mean that people are pretty doubtful that it existed. It doesn't mean that people are like, I don't know, it might have existed. What it really means is that we know that a language existed with certain characteristics based on historical reconstructing. So we look at the modern languages and we know that these modern languages really couldn't exist in the way they do unless there was some language in the past that was a certain way. So we know that the language exists, but we don't necessarily know exactly what it looks like. So that's why it's hypothetical, and that's why we say Proto-Indo-European, and that's also why when you see words in Proto-Indo-European, if you've ever come across them, they'll usually have a little asterisk, because this means that this isn't how somebody wrote it, and we don't have any records of somebody saying that word and pronouncing exactly like that. It's just kind of our best guess at a word that almost certainly existed, but we don't know exactly how it was. So just to clear the air on the proto part, because I know a lot of people have their doubts, especially people who have some sort of agenda. They'll often criticize the idea of a proto language, and I don't think that. I think that sometimes there's some misinterpretation. So a proto language is a thing that we know existed, but we don't know exactly how it looked. So just kind of like, I'm trying to think of an analogy in like archaeology. So like we see some fossils of a temple or something, or not. They wouldn't be fossils. I guess it'd be remains of a temple, ruins of a temple. We see these and we kind of can guess what the temple looked like, but we don't know exactly what it looked like. Or maybe we see a statue and we know it was painted probably, but we don't know exactly how it was painted. But we know it existed. We know that there was a temple. We know there was a statue, but we don't know all the details about it. So the reconstructed temple is kind of an abstract, hypothetical asterisk thing, but we know that it existed. So that's I think I've made my point. Anyway, Proto-Indo-European is this kind of a reconstructed language that is the ancestor of a lot of modern languages in India and in Europe. So that's why it's Indo-European. And there's actually some branches of Proto-Indo-European, or some Indo-European sub-branches, so descended from Proto-Indo-European, that actually made it to lots of different places. So there were some languages in Anatolia, which is where modern-day Turkey is, that were spoken, that were descended from Proto-Indo-European. These are called the Anatolian languages, and so that wouldn't be necessarily Eurasia. That'd be West Asia. I guess it is Eurasia. It wouldn't be India or Europe, so it'd be just a different part of West Asia. And then there's the Tocharian branch is the main exception, so that's more which is it's a branch of Indo-European languages that made it all the way to China, what is modern day China. So just to kind of clarify that the name is loosely based on where the modern languages are today, but of course the spread was a little different in the past, and it doesn't obviously list every single possible location. So in the Middle East there's a lot of languages, and there's no West Asia part of the acronym or anything like that. So or abbreviated name. Just to give you some context on what Proto-Indo-European mean, just to break down the name. Anyway, so there's a lot of these modern languages. So some examples are English, obviously, Spanish, Hindi, Greek. Let's think of some other ones, because I'm trying to cover all the different branches. All the Slavic languages, so like Russian and the Albanian and Armenian, other languages like this, and all these and Iranian languages that are closely related to the Indian languages like Hindi, like Persian. All these languages, they share some things that we can look at and reasonably deduce they either had a strong influence on one another or they are descended from the same language. And so people have actually done this throughout history. So I said Spanish and Greek, but Spanish obviously descends from Latin, or maybe not so obvious, but it does indeed descend from Latin. And in Latin, people in the ancient Roman times would think about Latin and the similarities between Latin and Greek because they had a lot of contact with the Greeks. And they'd be like, these seem pretty related. Maybe Latin comes from Greek. And this wasn't entirely wrong because Latin and Greek are related, but Latin does not come from Greek. They are actually sister languages that both descend from Proto-Indo-European. And so later, Sir William Jones, a British philologist who got the opportunity to work in India with some scholars of the Sanskrit language, he was able to look at these Indian languages like Sanskrit and make similar connections. So he was like, there's got to be some sort of, just like the Romans were like, there's got to be some sort of connection between Latin and Greek. He was like, there's got to be some sort of connection to Latin and Greek and Sanskrit. So he also made a lot of correct suppositions. He also made some incorrect ones. So I think he threw some other languages in there. Maybe it was like Turkic languages that he thought might be related to Indo-European languages. So he wasn't right about everything, but he was one of the first people like on record to suppose that all these different languages and all these different places actually had a common ancestor. And so as I said, he was right about a lot of it, and right as in, that's the consensus today. And he was able to kind of draw these comparisons based on the grammar. And so, a lot of these Indo-European languages will have similar case endings and verb endings, and they have similar phonetic structure. So, if you've ever learned another Indo-European language that's very different from your own, you might think it's very different, but there's actually, if you then go and learn like a Sino-Tibetan language like Chinese or something, you'll notice that there's actually a very large difference between English and Chinese, and it's a lot larger than the difference between English and pretty much any Indo-European language. And it's kind of like, it's like the water you swim in, so it's kind of hard to see that sometimes, but maybe some of you folks who have experience with non-Indo-European languages could attest to this. And anyway, so he noticed this comparison, and then over the next few centuries, scholars were able to kind of build on this idea and come up with better and better guesses about what Proto-Indo-European would have looked like. So we have all these case endings and verb endings, so we're like, okay, probably had those as well. We have things like in English, like the ablaut. So ablaut means you can change a verb, or you can change a vowel in a word, and it changes the meaning. So sing, sang, sung is an example of ablaut in English. So this kind of a connection where it's like, okay, this appears to be inherited in a lot of different Indo-European languages. So we're thinking that the Indo-European language, Proto-Indo-European language, had this kind of a feature where you could change a vowel and it would change the meaning of a word. And that's the consensus today, is that sing, sang, sung actually descends from something like sing, like S-E-N-G, something like that, S-N-G, something like more like a consonant, like a syllabic consonant. So sung, that'd be like sung, and then like sang. I don't remember exactly how that one was derived, but these are all thought to be features of Proto-Indo-European just based on looking at these different different ancient languages like Sanskrit, Greek, and ancient Greek and Latin. And then there's a lot of phonological features in vocabulary that can be reconstructed just by looking at modern words and then kind of trying to undo some of the sound changes back in time. And I give some examples of that in my historical linguistics video for anyone who wants to check that out. So we know that there is this language, the Proto-Indo-European language. Proto meaning it's we don't know exactly how it looked. We don't have written records of it. Indo-European meaning it covers large swaths of land, including India and Europe, and lots of places in between. And then we know that certain languages descend from it based off of there's these shared features. And so one thing that's really cool about Indo-European linguistics is that it's actually made some claims that are testable. And so a lot of times, when, especially in humanities, people can be doubtful of, the scientific process of something like historically reconstructing a language. And one thing I found really cool was kind of like a I told you so moment in linguistics, which was when back as people were really reconstructing Proto-Indo-European in like the 1800s, there was, I don't want to mess it up, but I can't remember the name, so I'm not going to say this guy's name, but I actually have made a video where I've mentioned this dude. There's a linguist who guessed that based off of the reconstructions that we've made of Proto-Indo-European, there was probably some sounds that existed in Proto-Indo-European that got lost in a bunch of languages, because there's some like sound changes that really would only appear in a certain environment. So you can think like, I'm trying to think. Let's think of a good example here. So in Spanish, when you have a word like an English word like Steve, a Spanish speaker might pronounce it like Steve, and then in some Spanish dialects they might drop the S, so it'd be like Steve. Like that's kind of how they might pronounce the word Steve. You could see that if you see the E and the T, that you might guess, and then you see the English word Steve, and then maybe an English speaker drops the T, so it's like Sieve, just kind of hypothetical example. Then we can guess that there was that the Proto-Indo-European was Steve or something based off of these two descendant languages, even though we don't have any, direct evidence for the ST combination. That's not the best example. I wish there. Anyway, the sounds that he predicted, this linguist that I will hopefully remember at some point in this video and have an aha moment. He guessed that there was these sounds called laryngals. So these are often represented with H and then a number. So it kind of looks like almost like a molecule, like H2O or something. So there's H1, H2, and H3, and the reason they're H is it's thought that these sounds that were predicted based off of the historical reconstructing methods, it's thought that these sounds were something like an H. They're kind of like somewhere in between a vowel and a breathy consonant like that, and they had these different effects on words that led to the modern distribution of different consonants and vowels that we have today. And it's basically thought that the only explanation for why all these languages that we know are related and have all these shared features, the only reason that some of these words would look like this is if there was some special consonants. So anyway, he predicted this, and everybody was like, all right, okay, I mean, that's a good model. We have no idea if you're right or not. But then they discovered new texts in a yet undiscovered Indo-European language. Can't date exactly when this happened. I think it was in the 1900s, but maybe it was earlier than I think. It was in this language called Hittite, and so I said those earlier that there were some of these languages spoken in Turkey, and so Anatolia is what they call that peninsula when you're not referring to a specific time period. And so they found these texts that were written in cuneiform that were really old and that had these laryngals, and obviously we don't know 100% how they would have pronounced these, because they were just symbols that could have been pronounced different ways based on because basically the cuneiform that was used to write Hittite, I think, used different symbols, or used related symbols that were like kind of modified to write these consonants that were predicted. and Saussure. I just remembered the guy's name. So I don't remember his first name, but Saussure, I think. Anyway, he was the one who predicted the sounds. Anyway, when they discovered these in Hittite, I think it was long after Saussure had died, unfortunately, but they were like, okay, these are exactly in the positions where Saussure predicted they would be, and they also they're also in a very old Indo-European language, so it makes perfect sense that they would have gotten lost eventually. But in this daughter language, it happened to have been conserved. So that just goes to show that the power of reconstructing a language. It can actually have it can be scientifically tested. It's kind of like when Einstein predicted black holes or something. I believe it was Einstein that predicted black holes. Anyway, I think relativity. So the explanations for space-time basically predicted that something like a black hole could exist, and then everybody was like, all right, cool. I mean, nice model again. same kind of reaction. But then they were actually observed. Black holes were observed in once we had more like data and more telescopes and stuff like that. So it just shows how good the model was. And it's the same thing with Proto-Indo-European. So like Saussure had no idea that these Hittite texts existed. He had no way of knowing that they existed, yet he accurately predicted some features of them that just based off of the data that he had from all these modern Indo-European languages and some historical ones like Latin and Greek and all that. So I think that's really cool. Hopefully this has been a good explanation. I want to talk about some of the newer stuff in Indo-European linguistics as well. But hopefully that was a good overview of the kind of intro. So some of the cool new stuff that's coming out is we're learning as, I guess, a scientific community other ways to learn about Proto-Indo-European or the Proto-Indo-European peoples other than just their language. So it's kind of crazy when you think about how wide these languages spread. It's like, okay, that had to have been a pretty crazy event, right? So like the Romance languages they spread to just lots of parts of Southern Europe, basically, right? But and that's, when you think about it, that's not even that much land. Like that's compared to where all Indo-European languages are. And we know that the spread of Romance languages had to do with like the Roman Empire, like a very important historical event. So one would suppose that a similar historical event had to be associated with the spread of Indo-European languages. And how can we learn about this? Especially since the time depth here is a lot different. It's supposed that Proto-Indo-European was spoken, I think, in like 4000 BC, like at least one of the later versions of it. So that's a really long time ago. How can we learn about this? And obviously, there's other lines of study for this kind of information, and that would be something like archaeology, and then more recently, ancient genetics. And so this helps us learn about who the heck these people were that somehow spread their languages all over Eurasia, and in some of them potentially into China. And so basically what has been figured out, and not just recently, but it's been more confirmed recently through genetic evidence, is that there are actually a lot of more predictions about Proto-Indo-European based that linguists made that were again validated. So Proto-Indo-European is a reconstructed language, but it has certain words that imply something about its culture. So we can reconstruct words for something like a wheel, and guess that they had the wheel, right? Because if all the daughter languages have a word for wheel that appears to be descended from one word, then there's a good chance that they had a wheel. And we can do the same thing with their pastoral lifestyle. We can guess that they were pastoralists. We can guess that they had a relatively patriarchal society based on their kinship terms. And so a lot of these predictions, again, it was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. That's a good model. And with genetic evidence, it's actually been more confirmed because we can look at, so we're guessing they're pastoralists, right? That means they would potentially live in an open area where they could have their herds graze. And so when we look at genetic evidence, we're like, where can we find a gene that's associated with all these peoples that speak Indo-European languages, and where can we find some of the oldest version of those? So genes shared by people all across Eurasia that speak Indo-European languages. we can, and then where's the source potentially, or at least some of the older versions of these the progenitors of these of the spread of this language, and what do you know, the origin or potential homeland of Indo-Europeans was in a very vast grassland where lots of herds could I don't know, eat and graze. So this is in the steppe. This is what they call it. This is like kind of in modern day Ukraine and Russia. There's just this very vast grasslands, and obviously there could have been everybody obviously eventually or originally comes from East or West Africa. I don't remember, East Africa, I think. But so it's obviously there was places before that. So it's Proto-Indo-Europeans or whatever. But we know that at least the one of the last common ancestors of most of these Proto-Indo-European languages, they did live in this area, or we don't know that, but that's the consensus right now in ancient genetics, and that goes perfectly with the linguistic evidence. And we also can kind of track their migration patterns in tandem with the linguistic patterns, and so we can guess that obviously some of them had to have eventually gone west towards Western Europe from somewhere in the steppes, and then some of them obviously had to go south and east towards India. So we can track those migrations and make predictions about those, and it's creating a very cohesive picture within the last 10 years of who these people were, and how they moved, and how they mixed with other peoples, and how these cultural fusions worked, and it's really cool. I think it's really interesting. There's a lot, just forewarning to anybody who maybe gets down a rabbit hole. There's a lot of nationalist, I guess, ideas that pair well with claiming something like we're the original peoples or whatever. So like, be careful. It's definitely, I've made a video about how the Nazis liked this idea because if they were able to claim that they were the mostly Indo-Europeans or something, or the best Indo-Europeans, then that's kind of fit well with their racial hierarchy and stuff. So be careful when you look into this stuff. People will tend to spin it a certain way in order to make themselves sound better. I've seen similar things with Hindu nationalists as well. So don't take everybody's word for it. Definitely look into the papers and stuff yourself if you're curious. But yeah, it's really interesting, and there are a lot of definite claims that can be supported about the history of Europe and India and their languages and their cultures. And there's also a lot of claims that are not supported that people will make on top of those in order to fulfill their nationalist needs. I wanted to put that out there because that's something I run into a decent amount on the internet, especially since I make videos about this kind of things. I'll see a lot of those comments. So yeah, it's really, really cool stuff. Take certain things with a grain of salt, but yeah, the Indo-European or Proto-Indo-European language is something that did exist. We don't know exactly how it looked, and we are currently finding out more about the peoples that spoke it, but it is a really cool aspect of linguistics and then more recently archaeology and ancient genetics. And I think it's a really cool thing to learn about, especially if you speak a Indo-European language or multiple, or you have or you're interested in ancient history. And then there's similar things that can be done with other language families as well. I like to talk about the things that I know a lot about, but of course you can do similar things for different language families, and you can do this for Afro-Asiatic languages and Sino-Tibetan languages. So really cool stuff that you can do there, and there's the same kind of ancient genetic strategies and archaeology pairings are being done there as well. So if you're interested in that, definitely dive into that, because I think I haven't seen a lot of content about that either, as I've been kind of looking for things to read about and listen to and learn about, because there's just frankly been a lot more resources dedicated towards Indo-European languages, or Indo-European linguistics. So lots of other cool stuff as well. Just always a good caveat to add. But yeah, this is kind of most of what I wanted to cover. I find this stuff fascinating. I'd love to hear what you guys think, different questions, and maybe some ideas for future videos or podcasts. Definitely send in the comments. And if I made any mistakes, feel free to let me know. I think I've definitely made mistakes in past videos. Like usually it's something small. If it's big enough, I'll probably remove the video. But if it is something small, I'll add a correction or something in the top of top comment, like pin it or something. So if you notice anything like that, let me know. Hopefully I didn't get Saussure's name wrong. I'm pretty sure that's his name. Maybe it's Saussure. Anyway, that's feel free to correct me. I'm not infallible at all, and especially when I'm doing something like this, kind of off the cuff, I'm more liable to make smaller mistakes. I do feel confident in the overall thesis of this podcast, but for sure I'm not infallible. Another thing I wanted to bring up is that I am looking to get more support as I kind of grow this channel. I've been putting, obviously, if you've been following it at all, there's been an exponential increase in the amount of videos and shorts and stuff that I put out because I am getting very motivated recently. Some of these shorts have been doing well, getting more attention, and so I've been putting a lot more effort into this, but I also do have a limited amount of time, and it would be great to get some support for those of you who maybe benefit from this a lot or have really been diving into my content. So I opened I'm pretty new to this because it only recently let me monetize, but I opened a members section of my channel. So I think you can become a member for the default is $5, and once I get some members, I'll start doing like videos that are members only, or maybe release stuff early and then be able to respond to your guys' comments ahead of time and really have some interesting discussions and maybe ask members what they're interested in for next videos and stuff. So if you guys are interested in supporting, that's a way you can do it right now. It would be awesome. I think I'm at a point in my, I guess, content creation journey where the support would go a long way, because if you get bigger, the numbers get multiplied a little bit easier, and it makes things probably a little bit easier with sponsors and monetization of the actual views. But right now I'm not really, I can't really benefit from that as much. So a little bit of member support would be awesome. If not, no worries. I really appreciate all of you who comment and like and start interesting discussions in the comment sections. I think that is a great way to support as well. So I think the name of the members, just to make sure you're in the right spot if you are interested, it's Nardi's Noble Nerds. I think that's what I called it. So if you find yourself there and you're looking to support, you're in the right place. Feel free to leave some questions and comments about that as well if you've got any ideas about supporting. So anyway, that'll wrap it up or I'll wrap it up here. I'm excited to keep making this and to eventually bring some more people on, and have some really interesting discussions, and all the engagement and comments that you can give will help me figure out what the best topic is for the next podcast or video. So let me know, and have a great rest of your day.